All right, folks, we're back, and our schedule got a little delayed due to the food situation and whatnot, so we've had to move a few things around. I was going to do a studio tour right now, but I'd like to actually take my next guest first. Yeah, we've been having some exciting times getting them set up during the downtime there. I also have a whole stack of facts here. It's way too many faxes. I frankly thought I was going to have more downtime, so again, to anyone who doesn't get there, holy Lord. Wow. Okay. Well, one person earned it. Because can we get in on that on camera too? There we go. If there's any obscenity there, I don't know what I can't even begin to analyze this. We've got isn't that the Famicom Disk System boy, right? And we've got Moomin, who's always good. We effed up in the crib using Binbos. Sad Mac. It's the whole thing. Do you still need that IBM Model M2 keyboard? I actually don't. I got two, I think. Oh, is this? Wait, do I know who this is? Is this Bayorn? Huh. I'm not sure. Anyway, but yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to read a whole lot more of these. We have so much going on. So I'm just going to go ahead and race into our next guest here. So hopefully everyone's back from lunch, etc. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one more I sent.
Okay.
This one here. Anyone? If you know, you know. Technically, that's some soft core there, but from way back. Also, I don't think she ever got properly compensated, but well, anyway. Here we are. This is Ben, my next guest. He is with the band What Strange Beasts. He's been a friend of mine for a very long. How long have we been friends at this point?
I think about 14 years, 2007, I think.
Okay, yeah, that scans.
About 2007. I think when I first met you, you were 17 years old and working at a local computer recycler.
Yep.
And I remember the first thing I remember about you was you were just always trying to show me stuff and all this old tech, and
I've always been doing this, even when I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
And it's just, it's amazing like how much things have changed.
But also, I have money now. I didn't used to. Trust me. Yes, I gotta. Wow, look at all this. Whoa, what on earth was that?
Don't know.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm sorry, folks. We lost the multicam feed for a second. I was confused.
Whoops.
Look at this ½ inch of papers that have come off the fax machine.
We had to pick them up off the
Let's
floor.
just set those aside. I'm sorry. I didn't grab your notes, so give me just a second. Here we go. There we go. I actually had questions I was supposed to ask at the beginning of each interview, and I've just been completely ignoring them. But the first one here is just, how's it going? Did you sleep, and did you get drunk last night? That's what I wrote here.
Pretty good, kind of, and not really.
That's fair. Neither did I, because I actually had something to do the next day. How often does that happen? Anyway, also, I forgot to ask you for a picture of your dog, and we don't really have a way to get it safely. So unfortunately, she won't be on the show.
Oh, geez.
I did my best, but
I
just
text you one, but
forgot.
I mean,
Anyway,
the content warning.
But per what you said, when you met me, I don't think anyone would have paid me a second thought. Really, I was like a wilding out teenager. It was like really irritating to be around. I think most people wouldn't have paid me a second thought.
Well, I mean, I remembered you.
That's my question.
You made
What's
sure
your
that I did.
excuse?
You made absolutely sure that I did.
Yeah, I was. Gosh, actually, the only reason that Tron knows me is because I followed him home from the store. Not literally, but very close. He was actually in the store buying some esoteric piece of ephemera. Some enormous piece of gear. We won't talk about that story. Gosh, because that's sort of how we met too.
Yeah, I think
buying a huge piece of gear.
I think that it was. I was with a friend who was buying a mini computer. And what was
AS400?
That's right.
It was the AS400 that was about this big.
Yeah.
I think about that big and about that tall.
I just kind of wanted to witness this endeavor. I wasn't really involved in it, but I do remember that when they got it home, they pulled out their stove because in their apartment it's the only 240 volt
right,
outlet.
And the machine just pulled way too much current to run off 120. In fact, one of the people who was involved in that endeavor was in chat earlier, Clinton.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, he actually showed up for a bit earlier, and he told that story in the chat.
Yeah,
and he weren't here yet, so I didn't have a chance to share it.
It
was remarkable. They pushed it up didn't they push it up the street several blocks to like a Radio Shack, I think. To like push it inside and then like disassembled it there in place.
I seem to remember that they got it in. I don't know how they did. I wasn't there for it. Thank God, because I would have been impressed. I would have been pressed into helping them. But I remember they got it in first, and then they went looking for a twin-ax terminal, which was the hard part.
Right, yeah, exactly. The machine itself is at least a big, lump
It's
that
a
someone's
chungus,
not
yeah.
likely to throw away. The definition therein. But the terminal is just like, that just looks like a computer that nobody wants.
Yeah.
Right? So the AS400 on the other hand, you look at it and you can imagine easily that it's something that runs a bunch of cash registers at a Safeway.
Oh, sure.
Probably what
or, all of Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad's logistics system, which I had to work on several years later.
Is that actually what it was used for?
It was very
wow.
unfortunate, and I had to sit there and look up. I'd have like a trucker come in and say, "You got any empties?" And I'm like, "Well, let's see." 5 minutes later, on the command line, "No, sorry."
Somewhere the tapes are spinning back and forth
It's
in another
probably
room.
still running that system to this very day.
Very likely, and the people using it probably hate it just as much. So anyway, but people in the chat have been going nuts in your instrument. But before we get to that, because yes, I was thinking about having a proper musical guest. I was thinking about actually having Ben's entire band on in order to. I was going to have them set up in the green room and actually like do a set. But once I got some other things on the schedule, I decided that's a bit much. Maybe next show.
And there's also a good reason why we couldn't do that this year, and that's because we're going into the studio to cut our second album in just a few weeks.
Oh, outstanding. But you do have one album out, which is The Maestro's Tale.
That's right.
And I know you were working on music the whole time I've known you. You've got a piano in your house, which like does not sound that impressive when you say it, but when you know what piano it is, it's slightly more so.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a fanboy.
Wait. Is that a reference? Oh, the shirt. Oh,
yeah.
Yes, the shirt. Yeah, there we go. I thought you were talking about the sort of 90s sofa pattern you've got on. I fought as hard as I could. I searched many stores to try and find a chair that looked like that. Well, I could only get the one you're sitting in.
We can make a really small one out of this, but I was actually just talking about your lav mic. I'm a huge fan of this thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Audio-Technica, they whip.
So my dad, when I was young, got a wireless lav mic kit in 1992 for his Canon 8mm.
Was it new?
Oh, yes.
Oh, that set him back.
It was not cheap, and it was from Asden, and it was wireless, and I remember how excited he was to put this lav mic on me when I was 11, right around the time this baby came up, but we'll get to that. And somewhere I have a tape of this. I'm going to have you help me digitize this, of me with that lav mic on, and he sends me down the hill on a sled, and I hit the hay bales at the bottom and flipped over with the Asden mic still clipped to my snowsuit.
How have you not? This is sacrilege. We've known each other 14 years. You haven't played this for me?
I've got to be able to surprise you sometimes.
What is wrong with you? This is the most beautiful thing I've heard of. I could just play it on a loop.
Yeah,
for weeks,
it is
and it wouldn't get old. And then when it did get old, I just wait a week, it'd be brand new.
Frickin' new again. It is one of the funniest things that has happened on camera to me. And the mic broke.
Of course.
And then he super glued the clip back on, and it always had this disgusting CA glue smear on it.
That really fits with your father.
Absolutely.
Bless his heart. Whatever you say when someone's passed away, I can't remember.
May his memory be for a blessing.
There we go.
My dad, Roger, who worked for Roam in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you told me about that. The Roam and their weird phones.
Right. So any of your followers who are PBX aficionados, if you've ever touched the 9750 or 9751 systems, my dad worked on those. From your earliest audio experiences to now, you have found out, I did not know you to actually produce very many finished songs for an extremely long time. No.
And then just all of a sudden you went from nothing to having a band and very, what's the right word? Because it's so belittling to say, wow, this album sounds very clean. Right? Oh, you did it. Good work. No, what I really mean is it's got a huge sound. Like you really just put it together all of a sudden.
Thank you. We ended up going to Studio Litho, which is where Soundgarden cut Down on the Upside.
Oh, that's
right. And
album whips.
if you love the big sound of this, that is all owed to our incredible producer Don Gunn. He worked with Peter Frampton, King Crimson, so he's definitely. We were definitely standing in the shadows of giants there, so we're really lucky.
And it's like, it's just, for a bit I thought you were just sort of dinking around. I was not entirely sure you were going to produce an actual record. So I was impressed, and it took me forever to listen to it. You know this.
I do know this.
How long has this been out?
The masters have been in your possession to listen to for probably about 2.5 years.
No, it has not been that long.
You've
come here to my show and you've told a lie to the audience. That's a television crime.
Sorry.
I could believe a year and a half.
No, you're right. It's been about 20 months.
Okay, wow.
Okay.
That's quite a number. All right, well, anyway.
The summer of 2019.
I'm glad I finally listened to it, and I'd like to encourage anybody else. There should be a Bandcamp URL on the screen right now. I think there is.
You didn't set one up.
I thought we did. Well, anyway, what is it?
It's whatstrangebeasts.bandcamp.com.
What Strange Beasts, as in the poem by, I can never remember.
Oh God, who was it? Yeah, because you actually made a reference to that poem just a few weeks ago.
I did, and it was a solid one. We've both completely blanked it from our
memories. Yeah, it was some sort of piece of old gear, and he said that is definitely shambling its way to Jerusalem or something.
It's slouching towards Jerusalem. Soon it will be born.
We're also at Strange Beasts on Twitter.
Yeah,
that's a lot easier to remember.
So I had a couple comments here. Oh, we got it now. There we go. So I have a couple comments here that I'd written about the music after I listened to the album.
Sure.
The first thing actually is I went to your Bandcamp, and your summary says your music will scramble my earsticles, and I wondered if that was a balls joke, some genital humor, and if you knew that was on there.
That is plausible deniability because I did not write that copy.
Okay, so you're learning in real time here on National Internet Vision that one of your bandmates sabotaged your website with a balls joke. Well, first of all,
I'm pretty sure I know who it was, and I do remember it being there, but I was not responsible for it.
Fair. Oh,
but I
see. You knew it was there.
Own
okay,
it.
That's fair. Well, you're getting owned. You're getting owned by it. At any rate. But yeah,
this is not an own.
It is, I'm afraid. Anyway, but really, seriously though, I like your harmonies quite a bit. This is the best compliment I can give. Eyes on the Road sounds like a song that I found on mp3.com in 2002, which is now gone from everywhere except my personal website, because I've been maintaining it on a hard drive for 20 years, making sure that it doesn't go away. I really like it.
Thank you. That is actually one of the oldest songs. Our bassist Aaron brought that concept to us from a musical project from a long time ago. So this was an idea.
He wrote the original song. Did he used to live in New York?
Oh, you're talking about the specific song that you had. No, it is one of the oldest songs that we have. Yeah.
But the other thing I had written here is that the metal influences of You Are Lost sounds like a Queens of the Stone Age song played by a band I'd hear on Quad 106.5 in 1998. That's a compliment.
That is the greatest compliment you can
It's
give
also
me.
my entire review. So, yeah, folks, buy this band's album. I'm not even going to describe it. You go listen to it on Bandcamp. You know how it is now. You'll like it or you won't.
And it's out on vinyl.
And it is, yeah. It's out on vinyl. You can have it. Oh, that's right. It's a double album because you were leaning into the prog thing.
That's right.
Really, really hard. I don't even know what your influences are other than the Moody Blues.
Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Jethro Tull, Little Porcupine Tree. So yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, now before we move on to the instrument, I keep meaning to ask, what was the story? What was the eventual fate of the Fry's Electronics pianos? Because you tried to buy them.
Okay, so at first, thanks for asking, because that is a really interesting story. When they just started to liquidate Fry's, it looked like Fry's was on its death's door.
Anybody who doesn't know about Fry's Electronics, they're basically they're a hilarious story and sad story of this computer store that was sort of like Micro Center, if you know those, except it got mismanaged straight into a hole in the earth. And so as they went out, they slowly replaced huge chunks of their stock with as seen on TV merchandise, perfume started showing up on the shelves. It was horrifying. And so we were going in there into this corpse that had not learned to die as it should.
And one of the poor management decisions that Fry's made was that they bought, I think, about somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen at some point, Steinway Model D concert grand pianos. Now, for those of you who don't know, Steinway pianos aren't cheap, and that is their most expensive model that is reserved for concert halls of 1,000 people. It's 9 feet long. It's the dream instrument of pretty much any classical pianist. And they also didn't use them except during some Christmases.
Yeah,
But
because they stopped. I never saw anyone playing one, not once.
They had player mechanisms. They had actual QRS floppy disk MIDI modules.
I forgot about that, yeah.
So, but they didn't even use those. It would just sit there behind a stanchion and people would put Snapples on them.
Exactly, what a wild decision, right? To buy this fleet of the most expensive piano, the best piano, essentially, to essentially play MIDI files like you'd hear in a sushi bar.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, you know, except the sushi bar by a Yamaha that's got at least one less zero on it. You know,
it's like someone buying a brand new Mercedes and then leaving it to rot in the driveway, getting like moss all over it.
Well, that and the kids are doing skate tricks over it, right? Because they were just there, and you would walk by and you would see just like some 4-year-old just up there beating on it. It had like the one at our local one in Renton had like gouges out of the finish.
Someone must have tried to ollie over that thing.
It was ridiculous. Yeah, someone like Tony Hawk had just gone nuts on this thing. He's like, damn, look at those. It's got like a quarter pipe going on there, and he just lost control, blanked out.
Boom, you're in hell,
when
baby.
He came back, you know. But anyway, so when they went out of business, they decided to just fire sale, liquidate everything in the store to anyone who would buy it.
That's right.
And so you spent how long trying to get a hold of someone?
A few months. I tried to actually get a hold of, you know, who was in charge of liquidating at Fry's. And at first I got the runaround, but I kept calling because I had the impression that they were going to let these things go for a song. And
which they should have.
Yeah, because storing, servicing, and unloading these things is a time-consuming and expensive endeavor. I mean, you've got a piano that's 9.5 feet long, weighs about 1,200 pounds. It's, you know, it costs like $1,000 just to move these things.
It costs about $1,000 piano.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
If you put them all in one place, you're looking at a warehouse.
Yeah, a climate-controlled storage like garage.
Yeah, because they're so big. They're just physically like you could fit one in this room.
Right.
And this is not a small room.
Yeah, it would have been a fool's errand, and eventually I got a hold of the guy who was in charge of this, and he said, "Oh no, we're not gonna we have a buyer lined up." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then later on, he emails me and says, "Actually, make me an offer." And then I talked to my piano technician, and he said, "You need to ask yourself if you really want to do this, because this is going to be expensive. It's going to be time-consuming, and
if you're going to do anything with them, you're going to have to pay a lot. Because obviously, you're not getting this for yourself. You would be getting them to resell, or at worst, donate."
Well, I thought I would just put them in my front room and race them.
Right. I mean, you could stack them in the front yard and then stand on top of them and survey all that you command.
Right. I could even see the lake if I'm really lucky.
That's if it's a clear day. If the mountain is out.
But yeah, in the end, I decided not to go through with that. But you know, being able to at least get that far was something that had been turning over in my mind for many years.
Because it's the idea, because you'd always talked about this, the idea that like, I wonder if when we didn't know that they were failing,
right.
You were talking about, should I call them and say like, hey, you never used this thing, would you sell it to me for like a couple grand just to get it out of your store?
We knew failure was imminent, was an option.
Of course, we knew it was in like 2003.
Yeah.
It was obvious they were on the outs. And I have one more question before we move on to this. Do you remember the time you were driving to a Craigslist deal in the Renton Highlands and you saw a guy running down the sidewalk? Can you briefly describe that tableau?
Is this the slogan? So we were in the Renton Highlands, and I think we were looking at apartments or something. I can't remember. And there was some sort of domestic dispute. And
which we shouldn't laugh at. But,
no, it was someone was having a very bad day, but sometimes even in someone's worst, they do something that is just really so ridiculous that it can't be like forgotten.
Yeah.
And this person had a like entire like wood paneled like JBL speaker cabinet, and I was driving by and just like launched it, like shot putted it, like Scottish Highland Games.
They were chasing someone, right?
Yeah, and it was like
you told me, you said you were like throw it in your head, just like throw it,
because it was like a caber toss, and it just went whew, and just detonated on the concrete, and I'm like woo, and then I was just like wow, it was just really satisfying to see that thing disintegrate, and I was just like stay classy, Renton, and just drove right.
There's only so many times in your life. You know, you can't do that on command. So if you see it happen, you got to appreciate it.
Well, now we have phones.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe we would have video now. Okay, so there are a couple things I wasn't able to do, unfortunately, here. I want to do this neat trick with a video mixer. I don't think we're going to be able to, but we can still look at what you brought.
Sure,
a little bit. It's a little awkward because of the angles and whatnot, but we have a plan. So a few people were going a little wild there in the chat about this guy.
Oh, yeah?
And yes, this is an Ensoniq. Now let's talk about the history of that company. Is interesting.
Sure. So Ensoniq was started by a couple of the guys who worked for Moss Technologies in the Bay Area.
Which I think, didn't they literally come from Commodore, or did Commodore buy them?
They were part of the team that created the C64.
Right.
And then they were no longer in the good graces of Commodore and decided to strike out on their own. And obviously the Commodore was a pretty big platform in the 80s for music production and computers. So they decided to take that knowledge. And I think part of that was the chip, the famous chip that made the Commodore.
The SID chip.
SID chip, yes,
thank you. And I don't remember if they did the audio in the Amiga. I think they did.
I think they did too, yeah. That sounds about right.
1,000 people in chat are currently telling me yes or no, and I'm not looking.
Yeah, I'm sure there are tons more subject matter experts in all of this on your feed right now than I.
But they definitely, so this has ties back to the Commodore 64's audio.
That's correct. And the actual original creation of the Commodore computer itself.
Do you know what Jason Grabo?
I do.
He says hi.
Tell him I will see him soon, and thanks for watching.
Anyway.
And that he should come play with us very soon. So Ensoniq was founded by these guys in the early 80s, and what they were pioneers on were early sampling, because up to that point in the early 80s, mid 80s, there were analog polyphonic synths that ran on VCOs. So they had analog oscillators, and then a whole new raft of American companies came through, like Kurzweil and Ensoniq, Alesis, and EMU.
Fairlight.
And Fairlight was a little earlier, but it's and EMU Systems started by Dave Ross.
And real quick, we've got a picture here, hon, if you want to put that up on the screen there. Center cam, there we go. That's not it. What's going on here?
That's your phone.
Oh, the phone feed is still on there. Can we go ahead? We'll bring that up in a moment. Anyway, we'll have that fixed in a moment, I hope. But basically, sampling synthesizers used to be enormous and fantastically expensive.
As much as a house.
Yeah, and just they required a lot of feed and caring, and nowadays, of course, there we go. We'll have that there in just a moment. Nowadays, of course, they're everything. You can hardly get something that's not a sampling synth. Right.
I mean, synthesizers that are now there's a resurgence of interest in analog synths. As a matter of fact, the original Prophet 10, 5, and 10, that was the first programmable polyphonic synthesizer that was analog, made by Dave Smith, was just, I didn't want to say reissued, because he basically said, this isn't a reissue, this isn't a reimagining, this is just the next hardware revision 35 years later.
We're doing it again, cleaning some things up with new technology.
And it's brilliant. But
I was going to say, the Fairlight CMI, this guy right here, this is the Fairlight CMI. I think Peter Gabriel loved this thing, right?
That's right.
Hi
Peter,
there.
Hi. And Terminator 2 score was done on this. As a matter of fact, the one that made the Terminator 2 score is on Reverb right now. So if you've got a cool $20,000, you can own one of these yourself. And it was used to do the.
Oh, right. Yeah. And that's probably how much it cost originally in $79.
That's right.
Yeah. So we can lose that. That's just a fantastically expensive, enormous, complex piece of gear. Just a wonderful device, but just very expensive and kind of limited. Right. And by the 80s.
Yeah, by the 80s, it was all about what can computers do inside of the case of a keyboard. It's not, the kind of buzzy, abstract sounds of the 70s. Now we've got computers in the shape of a keyboard that can play real sampled songs, play them back, alter them, mix them together, and that became kind of the future of music production. So companies like Ensoniq, EMU Systems, have you ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he's playing that sampler? That was also this kind of era.
It was a reasonably consumer affordable device. Yes, he was relatively rich.
Yeah, he was definitely a rich kid, but now you could store samples on floppy disks, and that was basically how you would load new sounds into the keyboard. And that was a huge deal.
And we'll come back to that
just a
when we
moment.
take a closer look at this. But now, what's interesting is that Ensoniq started out with, I think their first instrument was the ESQ1, which I just threw away. For reasons I didn't think about it. I didn't quite throw it away, but it was like the lizard I used to have. I had to give it to a zoo because I could not feed and care. It was getting beat up in my possession, but it's basically it's
the lizard or the keyboard.
The keyboard. No, she was beating me up.
She was.
She was. Did you ever see her hit me?
You showed me a video.
Yeah, she had a tail about that big around.
No,
Yeah,
I mean, that thing kicked your butt up and down the street.
Correct. She escaped several times. It was like owning a small alligator. But anyway, but the ESQ1, right? That was, I think, their first foray, and it was, pardon me, it was not quite what they wanted. You know, it did samples, but it did very, very few bits and very few samples. So it was like, they were like 7-bit samples. It would only do just like 1/8 of a second, and then it would synthesize the rest.
Yeah,
right?
there was definitely some like fudging and trickery going on. It was not the kind of, it was not the kind of fidelity people were looking for. Even with the Fairlight, you had, because it was such an expensive computer, there was more wiggle room on there.
Yeah. So this guy here is from Whenabouts.
So this is the TS10. So this is a keyboard that came out in 1993. This particular unit was made in 95, so like a little bit midway through its lifespan. I think they made.
I'm being told the Mirage was actually the first one. That's fair. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, that's right. And so this one was made it was a successor to another keyboard called the ASR10, which also had a very similar sampling format, but the bigger features on this were that it was a bit more updated for the 90s. It has some really interesting features that you didn't really see very much and still don't see very much is one of those called polyphonic aftertouch.
Right.
And
oh man, which is it's so rare.
It is very rare. It's becoming a lot more common now because people are realizing you can do it again. But back then, that was a big deal.
And what that basically means, sorry, I don't know if you were going to go into it, but so suppose, for instance, that you have a synthesizer sound, right? It's a saw wave, just when you press a key on the keyboard, that determines which pitch, which bass note you're going to play. And then going back decades, keyboards have had velocity sensitivity. So the harder you hit it, it could be louder or it could have a shorter attack. So it could sound different depending on how hard you hit the key, literally how fast you hit it. Aftertouch then gives you the ability to change the sound after the key is down, after you touch. So you hit the key and then you can sort of wiggle like this. You push the key down further and you can then change the sound more. You can bend it, you could change the amplitude, anything you want, you can tie into that feature. The trouble is, the overwhelming majority of keyboards ever made with Aftertouch support monophonic aftertouch, or sorry,
channel aftertouch. They call it.
Yeah, single channel aftertouch. Is that what it is? So basically, you play a big fat 10-finger chord, wiggle one key, and the whole thing gets modulated. Poly aftertouch means that you could then wiggle your fingers individually, and of course, take quite some skill to do something with like that. But
it does, and on this one, compared to some of the newer keyboards that feature that, the implementation on this is kind of primitive and clunky, and I don't really have a way to demonstrate it easily, but I will say that it used a technology that had like an induction coil under each key that was printed on the PCB in tiny little spirals.
Yeah.
And it's it's hard to find one of these units where the keybed works. Mm-hmm. And every time you turn it on, it says calibrating keyboard, do not touch, and I do not know what would happen if you did touch the key, and I do not want to find out.
Of course.
Because if you have the keybed fail calibration, that means this thing is kind of toast, because the way that you would recalibrate it was you would send it back to Ensoniq, and they had a special...
Mm-hmm. We were just talking to Tron earlier about how the Lisp machines and some other older computers like that, they simply had no solution for this. A man would come to your place of business.
Right.
But in this case, yeah, you'd ship it back to them, and there simply was no other solution.
So specs on this, now we've moved into the early 90s, and they had expandable memory. So the standard model of this came with 4 megabytes of sample RAM. That you could. It was volatile, so it's battery backup, as was the custom. And
a battery backup on my belt was the style at the time.
Yeah, pretty much. And and it's a 3-volt lithium cell that is it's soldered onto the board.
Of course it is, right? Right.
So when I got this thing, I was fully prepared to desolder it and put a new cell on there, and I just like put the I wanted to open it up because I had to do some mods. We'll get to that in a second. And I put the meter on. I'm like, oh, 2.94, cool.
Well,
After
remember,
30 years.
You should still replace the battery, though. A
Yeah.
tip to anyone, and I cannot stress this enough. Anything, any type, no matter what, that contains a battery attached to the circuit board, take it out. It doesn't matter if it breaks the thing. If it's that old and it has a battery in it, lithium, lithium ion, NiCad, nickel metal hydride, get it out. It is a ticking time bomb. That is a ticking time bomb. You're very lucky.
Thank you.
And you should bring that over and I'll fix it, because
appreciate
it
that.
needs to come out and get replaced, or it's going to bleed onto the board, melt through the traces, and it will be garbage. Goes straight in the dumpster, no fixies. There is no coming back from it.
See, today I learned.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm really glad that didn't happen.
And I'm very glad that you're offering to do that, because lifting this thing actually threw out my back. It is the heaviest keyboard I've ever owned. It doesn't look like it.
It's heavier than the ESQ1. I was impressed.
It's heavier than the ESQ1. It's heavier than the Prophet 10. It's heavier than
Was it 50 pounds?
It's made of neutronium. I don't know what
so.
this is like.
Each pound weighs 1,000 pounds.
That's what it feels like when you lift this thing. It
Yeah, it's
really
amazing.
doesn't feel comfortable to lift. It's
We took it out of the
heavy.
flight case, and I thought it was going to get a lot lighter. It didn't.
No, this is
Not
like
really.
no. It's a lead brick. So this model already had 8 megs of RAM, and it took standard SIMs. So super. Yeah. How
Outstanding.
wonderful is that?
Just snap them out of your SE30 and pop them right in the keyboard.
Exactly. And if you actually look at the main board of this, which I have a picture I could probably send you if you want to
not
put
right
it up.
now,
But it looks like a Performa inside. As a matter of fact, I think it's running a 68K in there.
So we had a we had an SE30 board on here earlier.
It is. I think
So
a similar.
we've already
platform.
seen it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and it takes floppy disks to load the samples.
Yeah, so let's actually, can we take a tour of it?
Let's take a tour.
So what I've done here is, because we don't have an overhead camera, we're going to talk a little bit about how our studio setup works a little later, hopefully, if we have time. But in short, this is a feed for our video here. So can we go ahead and get that overlay? Can you give us the full screen? All right, one moment, folks. The audio issues.
We good?
Are we good?
Looks
all right,
fine
well,
to me.
people let us know in chat if the volume is problematic. Anyway, all right, so let's go over it. What do we got here?
So this is using a VFD, or vacuum fluorescent display, for probably everyone on this channel knows that. But these are also, this is not actually failing. It's a shutter artifact, which is really cool. But this is also a component that goes out a lot on these, but is intact on this. So like a lot of modern keyboards and synthesizers, this thing was very ahead of its time. It has, context-sensitive hotkeys, and you have your sequencer controllers here. It's a workstation, so you can actually sequence a piece of music here. I did just get this, so I'm not the biggest expert on it yet.
But the cool thing about it, as you were saying, as regards to the soft keys, is like you don't have to you don't have to turn a knob to pick things on the screen. You just you press the button closest to whatever you want.
No, but it does have a digital encoder here that.
Nope, you got to move the phone over the little bit.
Excuse me.
Hands.
So let me.
Sorry, folks, we've never done this before.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and go to load a disk image. Now, you might be wondering, how is that convenient to have a bunch of floppy disks? They even put
There's a little holder there.
a little holder here, which, by the way, is perfect for a phone. They were thinking ahead. As a matter of fact, I was thinking of drilling this out and putting a lightning connector.
Yeah. Put a little dock in there.
So I brought this up so that I could show you this. This is a floppy drive emulator with a tiny little OLED screen, which definitely doesn't belong in this timeline.
I see you've got the fully upgraded one. That's a lot of people know this as the GoTech.
That's right. This is a GoTech with the upgraded firmware in it. And
Flash floppy? Or is it the other one?
HXC.
HXC,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sure they can do either.
Yeah, I think both.
So on this tiny little thumb drive is every single commercially released diskette with image with a compatible sample for this. So before we go into that, let's listen to some of the default patches on here before
Let's
I
go
blow
back to the
them
main
away.
camera. And I was going to ask, actually, there's two little gray things there. Are those buttons? Or?
It took me forever to find out what that is, and the manual was very mysterious about that.
Okay. There's just two. I don't know if you all saw that, but there's these two little. I'm sorry, I turned the phone off.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. There we go. Okay. So there's these two little chiclets here.
There's no markings, there's no silk screenings, there's no embossment, nothing.
Nothing at all.
And you'd think, because it's next to the floppy drive, that it's some sort of control for the Sony floppy drive that was originally in there.
Right, you would really think so.
That you could maybe page through the disk images and stuff, but no, there's a menu for that already in the UI. In the manual, it just says that these buttons can be assigned to alter the sound somehow. And it said, try pressing them with some of the default patches to see what they do. I have not to this day gotten them to do anything.
You just have two mysterious Boolean modulation buttons?
Right, and what I
love
want to
this
do,
keyboard.
I want to just load two samples mapped each one. So it's like 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2,
Right,
2,
right,
2.
of course.
And
I've been trying to find that keyboard again. We need to get one.
That is, I think I know someone who has one.
Oh.
But it's anything from the Yamaha PSS 700 series. It should have that.
Right,
anything
okay.
that if you look at any Yamaha keyboard made in the 90s, especially like consumer keyboards, if they have the little silk screens of the drum kits and it says 1, 2, 3, 4 there, that's your boy.
Oh my gosh, sorry. Apparently we were getting a little bit of sound desync when we were looking at the phone screen. What else is new? All right, well, anyway, we should probably move on to actually hear what this thing sounds like, because it's the sound of the 90s, folks.
It is the sound of the 90s. Are we ready?
So
here?
now we have no idea if we're patched correctly here or anything. So we're actually going to rely a little bit on chat. I'm just going to have you start dinking around a little bit, and hopefully folks can tell us if it sounds good and if we can be heard.
We can actually have audio on this
over the keyboard. So
we should be good.
okay. All right.
Welcome to Multimedia CD-ROM.
I can hear it. All right, let's chill for a moment and just see, because I want to blow everyone's ears out. By the way, we're hearing from chat that you're actually supposed to hold the buttons, not just press them. The SD1 has the same feature, and it activates an alternate version of the patch.
Okay.
So you want to hold that and see what happens? And then just, do you press the patch button again or just play?
No, they're right. It
There
does
we
change
go.
it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I missed your name already, but thank you so much. And yeah, it's sounding great, everyone says. So yeah, so
Yep. That's awesome.
go ahead and just play. Thank you for calling Initron. Your call is very important to us. Please hold the line just a few minutes.
So can we get the phone feed one more time on this? Because and I want you to hold this, because the names of these patches are half the fun. This is
I'm just
really
going to
good.
get over here.
Please,
I'm just going to
please
stand up. I said I didn't tuck my shirt, so I'm just going to kneel
Get
down
up,
over
stand
here.
up.
All right.
Missed.
Okay, so we have missed.
We have missed.
That was missed.
Let's try Genesis. Let's see what the modifier key does.
Doesn't seem like it did anything on that one. You know what? Let me actually. I just realized I have enough mic cord. Let me just step around on the other side here.
Yeah, bring
Maybe a
one
lot
for
more
the other
convenient
side.
for both of us. There we
Perfect. Okay, cool. All right.
go. Hi, everyone.
And of course, there's only a nice sampled grand piano.
Of course. Do you have any idea how long the samples are on this?
I think they vary. I'm sure someone in the chat can tell us what the actual sampling depth is, because I've heard everything from like 13-bit to 20-bit or something really exotic.
And it's interesting
weird.
because in the Sonic, the ESQ1 uses some ridiculous. It's like I think it's 12.
Yeah, it's
You're
really
like, wait a minute, that doesn't
unconventional.
end on a typical RAM like length boundary. So where are they getting the chips for this? Are they tessellating the RAM?
I don't know.
It's so strange. Are
But-
they using the other bits in the RAM for like metadata? Like what the heck is going on?
But the wonderful thing about this is that this keyboard was so ahead of its time and very expensive. Accordingly, it was kind of rented out by film composers. So you're probably going to hear this on a lot of sitcoms and not sitcoms, but like television dramas, multimedia CD-ROM games. The composers would rent this out because it cost, I think, the equivalent of like $5,200 today back in the early 90s.
Okay, well, that's not too bad.
It wasn't too bad, but it was definitely a very expensive keyboard.
But the greatest thing of all is there's a counter on this ball.
Yeah, so as far as that joke, let's skip it, should we?
Oh, hey.
The sounds hold up.
Yeah, they do. That sounds wonderful.
They sound incredible.
Well, it's a caveat. Being that there is almost no good digital piano recording anyway, like the best, right? So this piano sounds good because we know what the limitations of sampling keyboards are.
And I should add to that the synthesized sounds, the actual samples of instruments on here aren't really anything to write home about, but for some reason the DAC on this thing, as you might be hearing, kind of cuts through the mix in a really special way.
Okay.
The NDI froze.
The NDI froze. Okay, well, let's just restart that. That's interesting. I've never had that problem before. Let's see.
Okay.
That's weird. We've lost the.
Oh no!
We've lost the phone feed completely. There we go.
Okay, cool.
Live television, folks. Hunter, are you monitoring the chat?
Doing my best.
Just make sure nobody's saying we lost all the audio, because I'm over here. Anyway, so there's the grand piano.
Yeah, so there's a grand piano patch. It's light years ahead for 1993. It's okay now, but this version has, as an aside, this is one of the later versions that had General MIDI.
This actually has GM support?
It does, because
you're kidding.
The ROM, it was determined by the actual ROM version, which was an EEPROM that on earlier versions, if you're unfortunate enough to get one of those, it has to be soldered on. This is a later one, so I was able to pull them out and put the latest version of firmware, which is 310.
And very briefly, let's just explain that General MIDI, if you don't know, MIDI itself, the original like 1983 MIDI spec, all it does is provide a protocol for communicating notes, arbitrary instrument IDs, and modulation values and whatnot. But it doesn't say that instrument 1 is a grand piano, and instrument 2 is an electric piano, and instrument 16 is a guitar. General MIDI is largely responsible for those and for defining what those sounds should roughly sound like. So anything that supports the General MIDI standard can be plugged in with what you and I remember from the 90s as a MIDI file. That is really a general MIDI file most of the time. Some weren't. Sometimes you'd play a MIDI file that would sound terrible and you didn't know why. That's because usually it was a Yamaha XG file, and we didn't know that because we didn't know to look for it. But what this means...
Or Roland GS or something.
Or Roland GS, right. But what this symbol here means is that if we put a floppy disk, I assume, in here...
I don't know if it plays SMFs off of a floppy.
Okay,
we'll have to test that someday.
But basically, General MIDI means that if we plug in a MIDI cable to this and we send the soundtrack from Rise of the Triad to it, a piano will sound like a piano and a drum will sound like a drum.
And it'll probably send light years ahead of what the game would have sounded like on a YMF 744 or even like a
FM,
OP.
yeah, exactly, FM synthesizer or whatever. So this is very cool because a lot of sampling keyboards won't do that.
That's right.
So you can actually load a full General MIDI bank into this.
That's theoretically, yeah. And I think that there was a, I think something, again, people in the chat probably know way more about this than I do, which is
Pardon me, folks,
awesome.
I need to adjust my position a little bit.
Is that I think that it will also has a sound canvas or a mapping for one of the more expanded sets you were talking about, too.
Okay, cool.
All right, let's go through some more of these sounds here.
Yeah, let's see a couple more, because I'm very curious about that. I was curious about the electric keys. That's got to be a Rhodes, right? How's that sound? Whoa. Just goes straight to that Law and Order sort of energy. That's actually, wow, that's a really like dark, sharp kind of E-piano, honestly.
It really is.
But yeah, let's hear the groove now. You're going for it.
Well, it's a kit.
Whoa. Wow. The high end on that.
Right.
That is just ridiculous.
It's so crisp and so 90s. It's the pure distilled music of the 90s.
You're right. What you said, it just cuts through the mix.
Sitar groove.
Oh gosh.
It has a really nice analog saw emulation.
Okay. really does. Yeah,
And
you've got a collection of analog synthesizers.
I do, and this is I would absolutely go on stage with this, and I will at some point.
That's remarkable. I have to kill the feed for just a moment here. Yeah, that's really something.
We've got this one called Movie Strings, which I think honestly sounds.
It tells the story.
You know, honestly, it's,
Whoops.
Yeah. This would probably sound a lot more dramatic if I had my sustain pedal with me, but you know, who's counting?
Can you not just lock the sustain on? Can't we just plug a 1/4 inch anything in there and fake it out?
Just someone like put it on their tongue. Re-bopping.
What's that called? Re-bopping. Okay, you know what? I really gotta know what that 12 string sounds like actually, because those really vary. Whoa.
Yeah, it's
That's
really
delicious.
Yeah,
That's
they're
absolutely
great.
delicious.
Can you see why I went crazy for this thing?
Oh, absolutely.
I had to
So I
have
remember
one.
you hit me up a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago?
Yeah, a couple months
ago. And you said, like, I can't believe what I just found on Reverb. And I'm like, I can. Now tell me what the heck I'm supposed to be impressed by. No, you sold me.
Glory Blend.
Glory Blend. Oh, yeah, Oh, wow, it's right there. That's that Lifetime movie moment.
A very special episode of Cathode Ray Dude. And this is a very special episode.
It is, actually, yeah.
We need to talk.
We need No, there's several jokes I could make. We won't.
Okay, Eurogroove.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, now is that sequenced or is that all a sample?
So that's a great question. So one of the things that's great about the Ensoniq synths, especially the TS series, is that they do wave sequencing. So you can actually create a sound that has sequenced elements that evolve over time.
Okay, so that's actually a short sample and it's self-sequencing.
Yeah, and you can. This is completely programmable if you're insane. And I may learn how to do that at some point. We're just going through the factory patches because that's all we have time for today.
You should try the mods. Try the mod buttons.
Oh, it mutes it.
Outstanding. Try the other one. Retrigger it. And then retrigger with it held down.
Same thing.
Is that a little louder though? Oh, or did you hit it harder? Okay, that's probably it.
I don't think this one. This isn't a velocity sensitive patch.
Yeah, I don't know. That one just sounded a little bit louder. But anyway,
Wave Glide. This one may be what it says on the tin.
Let's see. Oh, that's about right. Oh, and I'm sorry. I did want to mention the sort of thing that he's talking about here. How that's a built-in sequencer. That's pennies nowadays. It just happens. In '93, it didn't.
Yeah, doing this on the keyboard would have been. You could do this in GarageBand a million times better, in most cases. But doing this on the keyboard would have still been more economical than using like the earliest DAWs like Cakewalk or
I don't even think something like the
Windjammer.
Atari ST MIDI sequencers people were using. I don't think they could do stuff like this.
Yeah, it wasn't doing wave sequencing or anything like that.
Well, I don't even think that it had the ability to sort of arpeggiate on the fly like that. I could be wrong.
Right.
I
The
never
Chord
used
Wave
one.
Station was kind of what pioneered that. But that
true.
came a couple years before this.
Yeah, and that was where, and of course, we were talking about how you'd like to do a show with me sometime where we just go through a lot of those and talk about them, because that's where you start getting into like the really funky 90s stuff, like these strangely shaped instruments with all kinds of weird user interfaces.
Yeah, like the Ensoniq Fismo was the last.
Daniel,
Yep.
is your phone mic off?
I don't know.
Okay.
It looks like.
Let's see. Now it is. If it sounds better, then maybe.
Do we have audio?
Maybe that's. Oh yeah, but maybe that's why we were getting reverb up until now.
No, that was a different reason.
Okay, cool. Well, it's off now.
Is it good?
Yeah, I think we're good. But anyway, so whoa, let me just change my position here. Being a tripod is very exhausting. That's a little thick.
Yeah, just really good, like kind of 80s rock.
I love the control layout on here. There's just so much going on. It looks intimidating at first, but I see now. On my ESQ1, I want to talk about this section right here because this was very cool. It's a shame that they stepped back from it. On the ESQ1, these buttons here, all these ones at the top here, LFO, N1, N2, pitch, etc. These were all on a graph that showed you how the tone generation of the machine plugged together. So it showed you that you started with We started with the tone generator, and then it would go through the LFO, which is connected to the envelope and the filter and whatnot. But still, the fact is, you do have direct access to all this stuff here, so if you don't mind.
So it was like a silk screen signal flow chart.
Yeah, and so if you like just hit the button here, it takes you straight over to the envelope controls.
Right.
Envelope 2, envelope 1.
These can be edited either via these increment decrement buttons or with the digital encoder, which is really which still works like
day one, yeah. And so it's great because you can jump straight in and just start adjusting your ADSR parameters right there. And again, this was not super common at the time in a lot of stuff. For instance,
Hey, what's the phone mute button again?
I probably unmuted it. Yep, that was the problem. Sorry, folks.
Did we get any of that?
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to go sit back down because I am running out of energy to be a tripod.
That is okay.
At this point, people have seen the thing.
Yep.
And all right, there we go. We did not plan to rehearse this section.
But this gives you an idea of this is basically, to me, having been around at the time and wished that I had a nicer keyboard, the biggest thing that is so great about being into music now is there is a nice instrument for every strata of budget and experience. I picked up a Casio keyboard for $200. It was $199, and I adore that thing. It has strap lugs on it. It takes batteries. It has audio in, so I can plug in my other.
And you're talking about brand new, right?
Brand new. Just got it a few months ago. I put a strap on it. I took it camping with me. That's exactly what it's for. I love it. It sounds light years ahead of most of the keyboards that were around when I was a kid like this. But in that era, there wasn't really a mid-range. There were either the toy keyboard, the Casios that you got at Toys R Us with no pedals, no output, like no outputs besides headphones, and no velocity or anything like that. Yeah. And then there were things like this that cost as much as a car.
Right, and yeah, the way the market is flattened is remarkable, and it's because of what we were talking about, that everything turned to samples, and computers, because now you open up any keyboard. Whoa! What happened there?
Everyone's saying they're having terrible.
It's fixed.
No,
it's fixed.
No, it's not. Hold on.
No, everyone is saying it's still happening. Everything is good now.
No, hold on.
What?
Oh, now it's fixed.
Ooh.
It's that. I don't know what's causing that.
What the hell? We'll turn the speakers down. How long has this been going on?
Not very.
That's weird. We may have to turn that back up later. I'm sorry, folks. Yeah. Let me give you a little bit of a tip as far as live stream production goes. There is no way that I'm aware of to find out what audio OBS Studio is outputting. Just can't. It's not like you don't have to work at it. It's not like no. You just can't. It doesn't have that. It just doesn't. You can think about it first. You can write poems as you try and work through this. It just doesn't, as far as I can tell, have any way to find out that that your audio is screwed up. So like we're picking out the audio earlier in the chain, but there's just no way to get the mix down other than to send it to YouTube and then watch it somewhere else 30 seconds later. So. It's very frustrating because we've had to do all of our audio basically, only half hearing what's going on.
Sure.
It's a little frustrating. So I hope you got most of that. I checked the chat a couple times.
That was only a new thing.
Yeah, and well, that's beside the point. We've had a number of audio issues throughout this, and I'm just saying, like, there's only so much we can do about it. Yeah, the monitor feature doesn't work. It doesn't work. It outputs individual channels. I cannot find a way to output the full mix down. I Googled it. Everyone says you can't. So. Anyway, I'll look into it again later. Maybe it's possible, but it's not what we're doing today. So sorry about the feedback and whatnot. Anyway, but getting back to it.
Yep.
So everything now is just one chip.
Yeah, I mean everything. Like to that point, we were just talking with Tron over in a second ago about the new synths that have come out of Korg, the little like square ones, like the Wave State, the Op6, and the there's a third one that just came out recently. But they're all built in the same form factor, and if you pop it open, this $800 keyboard that weighs next to nothing, has a Raspberry Pi in it. Even has Raspberry Pi silkscreened on there. It's running an entire Linux kernel.
It's literally a Raspberry Pi.
It is literally a Raspberry Pi. You turn it on, and he told me he checked, and it has to completely enumerate all devices. It's not a great design, but it's very cheap, and it's very scalable, and it is very high margin because they wanted $800 for these things, and I guarantee those things probably cost less than $150 to make.
Yeah.
And so the democratization of the hardware through computers has had a really nice runoff effect for musical instruments.
Yeah, and I just heard in my head this like 1955 instructional video, you know, the democratization of music with computers.
Industry, science, and technology
Combined to create inexpensive instruments for even the beginner.
Men in lab coats putting screwdrivers into things and turning them.
We've come a long way from the Hammond organ, you know. We've gone from mechanical tone generators that required 5 guys to lift and could only be afforded by organizations and could only produce one sound, onto these great Baroque, you know, monstrous pieces of gear that you know Peter Gabriel was, you know, oh yeah, I bought the first one of those.
Right.
And it's going out and proselytizing, and then we've moved on to there's the GarageBand thing, but what's even more interesting than that is the Yamaha Reface. That's like a complete, it's a beautiful like piano sound, or it's a beautiful, like shockingly for what it is, or it's like a complete analog synthesizer or whatever, but it's in a package this big, and they're like, I think they were $300 or $400, right?
Yeah, they're like $350, and they've been around for like 10 years now at this point.
Yeah, those things are ancient, right?
Yeah.
Right? And so that was cool, and then we moved on. We had that little brief period with the Korg Volcas that was not quite what I wanted.
People
it to
still swear
be.
by the Volcas. I mean, like
they're very cool if you can think abstractly.
Sure, and they just
and
came
I'm
out
not
with the FM2, which actually has full 6-voice recreation of the Yamaha DX7, which
Did they get the polyphony up from 3?
Yeah, they did. So
okay.
there's a
See,
new
that
one.
was a big thing, right? Is that the Volca FM was very cool because
that
it gave
just came out.
The original one,
Right? The two that has expanded polyphony just came out.
The original version of that was cool, but it only had like 3-note polyphony, I
Yeah.
think, and you know, single voice and only a couple operators, and it was very abstract. But the response indicated that people wanted it.
Right, and now they have the Op6, which is really cool because it lets you have real-time control over the operators. There is knob per function for the
it's
operators.
unprecedented.
Yeah, and
It's
it has I'll have to bring one on the next stream, but it has a red light or a blue light, depending on whether it's carrier or a modulator.
Right.
So and there's a scope on the screen, so you can see in real time what you're doing, changing the ratios and algorithms does to the waveform.
Right, and that's the thing. It's like the introduction of those little OLED screens, right? That made it possible for Korg to sell you a relatively inexpensive synthesizer that had an oscilloscope built into it.
And the first time I ever saw one of those OLED screens was back in '06 when I had a little MP4 player, a DMV player.
Yep, it's the same screen for decades.
I loved that thing. Yeah. But I guess what I'm saying is that people really appreciate having like a place for every budget, but now there's kind of a pulling back and saying, hey, there were some really cool organic qualities to these old analog synthesizers, and the last 10 years has been just an explosion of new analog architectures and I guess reissues or revisions of original analog legends, like the Mini Moog Model D, the Prophet 5. Just a couple of days ago, and this is really exciting, it got leaked that Tom Oberheim is making a brand new synthesizer, and it is going to be probably the most he like with the Prophet 5 Rev 4. It's like, you say, well, this filter was better on this model. This filter was better on this model. It's like, guys,
why not both?
Why not both, guys? Stop fighting.
Yeah. Put it on the pizza. So
yeah, it's only $5,000.
So I think we have to wrap up here and move on to another guest. Is that right?
Yeah, we should do that. Ben, you want to play us out a little bit?
I was gonna actually ask if you had any sequences in there.
I don't have any sequences.
Okay, that's fine. But if you just want to bang something out.
But yeah. Actually, I need to put headphones back on because I won't be able to hear myself.
And am I going to have any sound or no?
Maybe.
We don't necessarily. We want to take a risk here.
Okay.
Don't talk on the mics while.
We got mics again? Okay, cool. So yeah, well, that was great. And I think you've got quite a collection of synths, but I wish we had more of those 90s ones we were talking about. I don't know, maybe, well, who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, I
hopefully
think
we'll have you on here again with another one.
Yeah, between having them in person and maybe taking a look at what was available back then, this is definitely an era of music tech that I think deserves to not be forgotten.
Yeah, I think so. I'm just gonna do a 1-hour show where I just have you try and figure out an Electribe. The one with the tube in it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they had one over at RePC. I'll do it. I'll put you in that hell.
I just saw some guy restoring one of those. It looked like it had been in the bottom of a pond.
That's about right. That's what I expect to happen to an Electribe. Their DJ.
It was in Britain, so it might have been the pond.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you so much for coming on here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. It's been fantastic. Once again, I'm envious of your coat. I really wish you blended into the furniture, but I couldn't get the best chair. So
we can make a chair out of this one, a very small one.
All right. Well, I'm gonna shuffle you out of here, get the cane, etc. And I'm sorry. Oh yeah, that's right. Once again, I did just want to remind everyone that you have an album out from your band, What Strange Beasts. It's called The Maestro's Tale. If you go to whatstrangebeasts.bandcamp.com,
or
you can pick that up. It's a double album. It's great stuff, and you should give it a listen. So we're going to be back in just a few minutes. Probably more in a couple minutes. Actually, we got to clear all this stuff out of here, so give us a good 15. With our next guest, another one of my great friends. Everybody on here today has been a great friend, and they would be even greater for being here. So we'll see you shortly. Hey, so I don't have my next guest on yet because I realized I needed to give the studio tour. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Let me just get up here. So. You might be wondering, how am I doing all this? Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm shocked it's gone so smoothly. I mean, I'm going to show you like the gear I'm using, but beyond the gear itself, it's just remarkable that things have like come together, as well as they have. I've got a note here that begins with me saying I'm pleased about that, and then says, "Wow, that won't have aged well," but apparently it did, which is just astonishing to me. I mean, at least it's going better than last time. Not that that's too hard. As you may have heard at the beginning of the show, or seen at the time, my previous big stream was just a catastrophe. It had no specific schedule. It had no goals, no funding, goal, nothing like that. And I had a multiple camera setup for it. And, in keeping with the maturity and responsibility of an individual in their mid-30s, I didn't test any of it. I simply said, oh, that'll work. And I showed up the day of, plugged it all together, and nothing worked. I literally plugged a bunch of dusty webcams into a 6 or 7 year old laptop, and who knew? It didn't have enough USB bandwidth. Yeah, who could have guessed? So pretty much I had cameras disconnecting randomly, my color depth issues, CPU overload, my headset wouldn't even stay connected. I was broadcasting from like a mic that made me sound like Duke Nukem. It was just absolutely terrible. Everybody had a good time anyway, somehow, mostly at my expense, I think, but today we're a little better prepared. So let's take a look. It's a little cobbled together, but we'll see. So we've got our 3 camera setup here, 1, 2, and 3. And these cameras are just stuff I had. This is the one I actually shoot my normal channel videos on. This is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K, and as the name suggests, it's capable of 6K video, although I actually shoot in 4 because my machine, it's not quite beefy enough for all of that. Not to mention the storage, it's just ridiculous. But today, it is not. It is shooting at 1080 via HDMI. This device here is what I used to shoot my videos on. Come on in here. Let's get a close-up on this horrible piece of crap. So this is the Panasonic AG-AC30. I think it was made for the worship market, which is not necessarily a condemnation of it, because there's a lot of money in that market. But I'll condemn it. I hate everything about this piece of crap. Everything sucks. The lens sucks. The optics are terrible. The color rendition is terrible. The power input's terrible, all the connections are terrible, the positions of the mic connectors are terrible, the built-in mic's terrible, the quality of the mic preamp's terrible. I used to think that I needed a new microphone because all my audio sounded like, well, there's some words I could use here, but anyway, it was just terrible. And when I upgraded to this guy, I plugged in my mic and I immediately said, this sounds like about $1,000 more than I actually spent. It was absurd. I hate the format this records in, the bit rate, I hate everything about it, just horrible. When this show is over, this thing is going to the dump. I don't even think I want to give it to someone. That's a lie. I'm not going to waste a perfectly functional camera, but You don't want this. Don't buy this. I spent so much money on this thing, and it just ruined my videos for like a year. Everything I shot was like purple and noisy and ugh. But what it does have is a functioning HDMI output, which is all I was looking for. Although, I'm not really quite using it, because the HDMI comes out here, goes 1 foot, then plugs into this monitor. This monitor is mostly just so that Tris, my camera operator, can see what's going on, because the camera has a little tiny baby screen on it that even I can't see with my reasonably functional vision. So this gives a little better display, but it also acts as an HDMI to SDI cross converter. So if you put in either signal, it'll spit out the other one. And in this case, we're spitting out HD SDI 1080p 60. P? No. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. And then our third camera over here, and as a reminder, the way these work in a multi-camera setup is you've got one camera that points towards the guest, one that points towards everyone, and then this one points towards the host. So every time you've seen me, just me, during this show, it's been captured on this camera. Now, if you saw this, if you watched my disc cameras video, you may have briefly seen this thing. This is Sony's PDW F335. I didn't have to check my notes for that one. And this actually is a very, very early professional broadcast HD camera. So this records on essentially a version of Blu-ray, a draft version of Blu-ray that Sony scooped from the Blu-ray design process, because they were involved in that. And they just sort of absconded with it, made their own standard. They called it professional disc. So this records on a Blu-ray disc and a cartridge that's just not compatible with any normal Blu-ray player. This records, whoops, just about kicked my teleprompter over. I used a teleprompter for the intro, by the way. That's how I was able to pull that off. This thing technically records in HD, but it's 1440 by 1080. Nobody had full res 1920 by 1080. A few people did, but you had to pay a lot of money to get full 16:9 HD video in like 2006, I think, when this came out. So this does 4:3 aspect ratio HD, so 1440 by 1080, and then it just stretches it. So it's squashing a 16:9 picture in there, kind of like a grown-up DV camera. Now this one doesn't output HDMI, and it doesn't output SDI. This one outputs analog composite. There's this bit in, what is it, CKY 2 or 3, I think, where like Bam Margera is going like, he's sitting in this rental car and he's like pointing at the radio like, you want to play a CD? How about a tape? Oh, no, it's just an AM, FM radio. That's the energy you're supposed to take here. That's analog component HD, okay? So we've got 3 different output formats here, and that doesn't matter because from there, oh, yep. Watch your step there. Go ahead, step over my mic cable. There we go. Get in here. You may recall if you watched my previous video, learning to run a broadcast in 1 hour, somebody loaned me a TriCaster TC-XD850 video switcher, which I was not able to keep. However, just after that show, no, just before I released it actually, somebody else got in touch with me and said, hey, would you like a TriCaster 300? Well, would I? I wonder. Anyway, so they sent me one, and it works perfectly. So this is a, much like the 850, this is a 1080i capable video switcher. It runs off a little Windows Vista Business machine, and it just has a really sophisticated like video switcher on it. I'm going to do another video about this guy soon enough, but this one takes SDI input, does not take HDMI, and it takes analog component. So we're actually doing a mixed analog digital capture here. Now we're not doing any audio because we found the audio characteristics of this thing weren't quite what we wanted. But the HDMI signal from the first camera heads over here, goes into this SDI scalar converter I got off Amazon for $60, and then SDIs into the TriCaster itself. And then from there, an SDI output for the TriCaster heads to our stream box. But first, this guy here is the TriCaster interface. This is how we do our primary camera switches. So if we just, here, come on over here. Come on over here a little bit closer. There we go, okay. So this is how we do our primary camera selection. That's how we pick our 3 angles there. And we can also, technically we can do transitions on there. And the fun thing about this, like I showed in the video, is you can also just, there we go, you just freeze that right in the middle, etc. Anyway, so this thing processes that, does your transitions and whatnot, and video switching, and then we have an SDI that heads over here to the Streambox. This is actually the machine that everyone helped me buy after the last stream. This is what the proceeds largely went towards. We've got we've got an AliExpress HDMI capture box gaffed to the front. That's how we captured the video coming out of the Symbolics machine earlier. It was a mad dash to get that working, so I just taped it on there so it wouldn't keep trying to rip the USB port off. We have a Blackmagic deck link in here that's absorbing the SDI video and piping it into, what else? OBS Studio, of course. It's good when it isn't bad. No shade, OBS Studio is a miracle, and the people who work on it are angels. Wonderful piece of software. It's working within limits, right? Our audio is coming in through this Behringer. We don't speak of Behringer in this house. We had it from before we found out they were a horrible company. 8-input DAC, which I think has been causing echo problems throughout this whole show. And then we've got OBS running here where we can do our primary transitions. You know, we can switch between all the scenes that we built, the usual thing. Come on, you've watched other people's channels before. I'm sure you've seen how OBS works. They're not the same thing. I should be clear. OBS does not do what the TriCaster does. There are two different types of video switcher. This is for a different kind of thing. And the people who do what those are intended for do not use OBS because it just isn't built for it. It's not designed for it. It is a wonderful piece of software, but it is intended for Twitch streamers more than it's intended for television. It's not to say you can't do it. Some people might swear by it, but they are not the same thing. I always have people say, just use OBS, just use OBS. It's not the same thing. So here's what's cool about all this. Did I get it all for $500? No. There's some substantial money in here. I had to buy, well, this cost me $1,400. $1,400. Got to take it to the cleaners. My phone looks better in this thing. It just has power zoom. That's the difference. $1,400 there. I think I paid $600 for this thing, which sucks because I really thought I was getting the SDI version. $2,000, maybe $2,500 for that thing, right? And then this guy here, if I'd paid for it, somebody sent that to me. I think that's like $600. The TriCaster itself, oh, those go for $5,000. Still, they're never going to stop going for $5,000. You know, the deck link capture card, the PC itself, we put it all together. What do we have here? It's probably $10,000. That's like, let's be real. It's probably $8,000 to $10,000 at least. The RTX graphics card in the PC that we need for OBS to process the video, I paid like $1,200 for that. That's where a good chunk of the stream revenue went because I just needed an RTX. You can't run any of this stuff without that. So I was screwed. I had to. But here's the thing, $10,000 is not what a TV studio should cost. It should cost $500,000. It should cost at least $500,000, right? We're talking not just an order of magnitude, but then 5 times on top of that. This is incredible that I could put this together. You know, I'm paying so little for the space here, right? I pay just a hilariously low amount of money. I'm not dumping my whole Patreon vig into this every month. Okay, I got a,
Hold on.
whoa, there we go. I got a great deal on this place. Don't get me wrong, right? So I've lived a charmed life. People have been very helpful. But even if I had spent full price on every single part of this, because I didn't pay for the TriCaster at market rates, right? Even if I had, I would be clocking in at less than a 20th of what should be the correct cost to run what is essentially a television studio. What you saw here today, so far, is you know, as well put together as many of the things that have been on broadcast television. If I do say so myself, okay, we may have had some problems, but it's largely just, you know, this is the first time we've done anything like this. The fact that I was able to just put together a bunch of crap that I had sitting around and some, you know, a few pieces of stuff that I spent some serious money on, and still be able to come up with something that's a perfectly satisfactory television show is a miracle of the modern age. The fact that this is all stitched together with AliExpress and Amazon video converters and going into a piece of free software running on, you know, it'll run on Windows, it'll run on Linux, it'll run on Mac OS, right? You can just take what you have and build a TV studio now. That is, man, I don't even know what to say. It's miraculous. And it's not clear why it happened. It didn't need to be like this. There are other industries where you can't just glue together a bunch of stuff and have something that's what ESPN is doing, what CNN is doing, what you know, Tech TV was doing when they were around. It's not all that different. You know, we don't have camera trucks. that's the biggest difference. We don't have a crane, right? You know, or everything else. It's just it's amazing how cheap it's gotten, and the rest of it's just effort, right? You know, it kind of always was. I mean, this Wayne's World, right? You know, they didn't have a lot of money either, but I realize they're fictional characters, but people really did that. You know, you could scrounge it together with 10-year-old cameras and whatnot. And what a remarkable opportunity. All right, we're going to go back to break for a couple of minutes, and I'm going to get my next guest in here. Thanks, folks. See you soon.